The forests have a permanent reputation for harboring high strangeness. Mysterious lights, phantom music, Bigfoot, aliens, fairies, ghosts, dogman, and more. But what if that is only the beginning? Have you yet found the idea of the not deer? Or perhaps more accurately, has the idea of the not deer yet found you? This animal, unique being, or exotic person is especially bizarre because unlike every other oddity in the paranormal realm, it has a negative name. Instead of being described for what it is, like a dog man or a moth man or Bigfoot, the only common name for it, at least here in the West, is the not deer. It looks like a deer, but it's not. It's not a deer. Maybe this is the most intriguing and alarming detail, yet maybe this not phenomenon is far more common than typically thought. We tend to hold an association between deer and our beloved Christmas here in the West. It's such a quaint, saccharine notion, isn't it? Santa Claus, all jolly and plump, dons his festive suit and heavy boots, then takes up his sleigh to steer the 8 tiny reindeer all across the world in a magical quest to deliver gifts to all the good little girls and boys. This has been romanticized for quite a while here, but something isn't quite right if the people in Scotland are to be believed. Amongst the deer may be someone or something. To follow is a line of commentary from r/notdeer by user Dr. Rocco Basilisk. I just came across the concept of not deer and realized I know this creature. We don't call it not deer. We call them fae or fairy cattle, deer that are somehow uncanny, ethereal. They have the same sense of being off, strange in ways difficult to pinpoint. They seem too bold and fearless, and they have a watchful, intelligent, evaluating kind of stare. In Scotland, we have several deer species, including the red deer, which are big deer, and roe. These are smaller and more delicate deer. The fae ones can resemble any of these. Some people say that they can talk, that either they imitate human speech or that they just leave you with the feeling or the memory of them speaking without it going through your ears first. I've never heard of them being aggressive, though. They're more upsetting and intimidating. But we do have a cultural tradition of behaving with careful respect to anything fae, since they're known to be unpredictable and fickle. I've heard of people feeding them to placate them, so leaving apples or carrots, etc. on paths where they've been seen. I've never seen one myself, at least I don't think so. I've seen plenty of deer when walking my mom's dogs over the years, and seen plenty of deer in general. Only once did I see one that acted strangely. A small herd bolted one time that I was out, but one slowly turned its head and stared for what felt like a long time, though it was probably less than a minute. I got a vibe of kind of disdain. It snorted, stamped a foot, and then very slowly walked off in the direction that the rest ran. But it stared, and it was as though I had just rudely intruded and interrupted it. It didn't look malformed in any way, but indeed it did act oddly. I've heard of fae cattle with red or white-tipped ears and legs, with oddly human eyes, or being seen, quote, dancing, standing on hind legs and gesturing, it seems, with forelimbs like they're doing sign language or some type of ceremonial dance. I've not seen anything that odd myself, but I have spoken to people who have. Fairies are sometimes said to be split into two main categories, the seelie and the unseelie. Usually, the seelie fairy court is alleged to be happy, bright, friendly to humans, and the unseelie to be moody, wild, and unfriendly to humans. The Fae are also thoroughly associated with glamoring and shapeshifting in order to influence and sometimes fully control what a human being sees, so it seems logical to me that they would take deer form in order to escape too much human attention, should they wish. The Native American peoples also have their own encounters with and beliefs about the not deer. Here is only a taste of the advice that the elders often pass down to the younger generations, and as a safety courtesy to guests, share it with them as well. If you see a deer, leave. If you hear your name being called in the woods, that's not your name. If you hear footsteps in the woods, no, you don't. In folklore across the world, there is a special emphasis on deer, and it dates back rather far, apparently, to the times of the Greek and Roman empires and the height of the Celtic cultures. This is where we find Cernunnos originally, it seems to me. It is a claim by some that he has been worshipped and known largely the world over, if not entirely the world over, because the legend and alleged encounters of a deer-human hybrid god, guardian, tormentor, and or foe is present in many countries and cultures. How can we know such a thing, though? Given my studies and personal experiences, I think that though it is possible via quantum travel, so concepts such as bodily vibration, density modification, areas with certain magnetic activity levels, wormholes, overlapping dimensions, it is more likely that these areas are populated with less physical races of peoples who either organically embody a mixture of familiar human traits with deer traits, or who pose as such because they are shapeshifters who enjoy that type of form for whatever reason. I believe, too, that every area, due to having unique weather, geography, plant life, and magnetic quirks, though each may host in general what are called fairies, who have or take these deer-inspired forms, hosts a race or races physically compatible with and therefore natural and specific to that area. I find it likely, too, that this is why our Reddit friend earlier in the show, among many others, reported the uncanny, intelligent, challenging meeting with a deer. I believe that these peoples and experiences are far more commonplace and widespread than recognized by the general public. Here we have the account of someone whose first time hunting brought about a face-to-face encounter with what sounds to me to be a classic hunter, not deer standoff. This story is by user equivalent equal 8027 on r/cryptids. So I was recently reading stories on Reddit of cryptids, and I came across one today that seemed eerily similar to an event that happened to me not too long ago. I was 16 at the time, and my family would go hunting at a deer lease in Comfort, Texas. We got to camp. The first day and night passed. No deer, and I was a little disappointed to have not seen any deer at the stand either time I went out. Flash forward to the next day, and I decide to hunt in a different stand in the morning on the other side of the camp. There were tons of doe but no bucks, so I went back to camp and decided to try the stand from the previous day one more time. Keep in mind, my first hunt of the day takes place from around 5 o'clock a.m. until around 10 o'clock a.m., and my night hunts from around 5 o'clock p.m. until sundown. I have my dad drop me off at the stand and he wishes me luck. I thank him and he drives off. For some reason, the bucks seemed to be running towards my feed. I thought that they were running after doe because they were in rut or something. I finally see a big 12-point and I got him. Then, when I'm waiting in my stand for my dad to come pick me up, the sun starts to completely set. I get out of my stand to go walk and stand by my deer for pickup, but as I was walking, something I hadn't seen in my stand was in the woods to my left. I heard it first rustling, and then footsteps. Finally, I saw its head peer out from behind the tree. A massive buck is what I thought I saw at first. Excited, I got onto one knee and shot at it. The shot 1/10 of the distance from the other deer that I had shot. Yet, when I thought I hit it dead in the chest, it stood there totally unfazed before stepping out completely and just staring at me. Here I started to panic. I reloaded my rifle and I took another shot, and then I reloaded it again and took another shot. Still nothing. As it stared at me, it tilted its head as if taunting me or trying to understand my desperation. Its eyes were lifeless and it began to walk towards me. I finally closed my eyes and shot at it one last time. It slowly walked back into the tree line, its eyes not leaving me once until it was fully back into the woods. I swore I saw it smirk at me as it was leaving. Not deer. That just seems so very accurate as to what I have seen. Did this person really meet a not deer, or was it all in their head? I find it interesting that they apparently shot the deer at close range multiple times. If this is true, they'd have been in a great position to see any bleeding or response to the gunshots. Of course, one's mind can certainly play detailed, interesting games on one, so who am I to say what really happened? I also believe that quantum superposition applies to everything, everyone, and that both and or other options are objectively just as real and true as any other, simply depending upon the expression of possibility or reality, aka timeline. And still, there's more. Here's another supposedly true account from Reddit by _.sis. I lived in Waynesboro, Virginia for about 5 years, less than 10 miles from the BRP North entrance, Skyline Drive South entrance. One night, I was having a particularly hard time settling in for bed. So I decided to start up the bike and to ride up to the first overlook on Skyline, only about a mile inside the park. It was about 11 p.m. when I got there, and pitch black. I killed the bike and got immediately uncomfortable. There's nothing up here besides wildlife, I reassured myself internally. I had my revolver tucked into my concealed carry holster, so I knew I definitely outmatched anything that could be up there. I managed about 10 minutes before I physically felt the hair raise on the back of my neck. Someone was watching me. Something bad was coming. The overlook was a sheer drop, or nearly so I wasn't concerned about anything popping up in that direction. But the mountainside, and therefore thick, untamed woods, were behind me. I sat in the dark for another 10 minutes or so, anxiety getting worse and worse. I heard a few things, but nothing out of the ordinary for a night in the woods. I decided to head home, since the feeling wasn't going away. Hopping onto my Suzuki, I started it up and rode off towards the gate. Now, anyone who lives in the country and rides a bike knows that wildlife is crazy active on roads that aren't traveled often at night. Being nighttime, and technically closed, I had to ride around a gate to get in. There were no other vehicles on the road at all. I hadn't seen a single other person since leaving Waynesboro proper. The speed limit was 30 miles per hour, but I clipped along at a measly 15 to keep an eye out for deer and other wildlife. It wouldn't do me any good to wreck only to lie there all night until someone happened to cross me in the morning, after all. Then I saw it. The term almost deer is actually really fitting, but not quite accurate. It was like a deer that someone who had never seen a deer drew, but only after someone else described it to them. It stood on the left side of the road, the mountainside, and I saw the eyes long before my headlight shone it fully. It was big, easily the biggest deer I've ever seen, and the lack of any horns at that time of the year suggested that it was a doe. The head was almost bovine in shape, but fixed to a deer's frame. The legs, they seemed too long in proportion to the body, think maned wolf proportions, and the body was extremely barrel-chested. I've always been creeped out by malformed wildlife, and this is no exception. Unfortunately, I had to get it to move, or risk passing within a few feet of it. I was not traveling another 30-plus miles up the road in the other direction to leave through another gate in the middle of the night, and I was not getting close to it. Dangers of it spooking and running into the side of my cruiser aside, I didn't want to get near it at all. Stopping and putting my feet down about 30 feet away from it, I tried to frighten it away. I flashed my beams down to low and then back to high. Nothing. I revved the engine. Nothing. I honked the considerable horn. Nada. Resting the bike on the kickstand, I left it idling and hopped off. I yelled at the thing, and it still didn't budge. So I started to the side of the road to grab something to toss near the deer thing, hoping to spook it that way. As soon as I crossed into the other lane, it rose up onto its hind legs. I froze, putting my hand on my gun. I wasn't about to get charged by an angry, confused, malformed doe. It took 2 jerky, unnatural steps towards the center of the lane on 2 legs and froze again, staring directly at me. It suddenly shook its head wildly like a dog with a toy, took another short step, and then hopped on 2 legs several times until it disappeared into the darkness on the right side of the road. I stepped back to the bike, mounted it, kicked up the kickstand, and turned the light towards the side of the road. On that side, there was a sheer drop of about 75 to 80 degrees compared to the roadway, and the thing's head was just peeking over the edge, still looking at me. The drop was about 40 to 50 feet, so there is no way it was standing at the base of the mountainside. I cracked the throttle and beat the hell out of there. I never went back up on Skyline Drive at night alone after that. One time was enough. Whatever it wasn't from around these parts in Hill Talk. Often in these encounters, I've noticed a few common patterns. There is an unusual amount of fearlessness, boldness, or irritation being expressed by the alleged deer. Bodily movements, either entirely too clunky or graceful for any average deer. Strange, oddly sentient behavior from the deer, such as perceived smirking. Completely impervious to physical attack. May exhibit abilities that the experiencer would usually understand to be impossible, aka paranormal. Something is typically off with the deer physically. Returning to Cernunnos, according to my research, that name was originally only found once, and it's said only to mean the horned one. His actual name, if he has one, is said to be a mystery to humankind. This reminded me of something I had seen before. Are you familiar with Neil Gaiman books? Sometimes I genuinely wonder if he knows more than he shares. In his American Gods book and show adaptation, there's a deeply mysterious character, a merchant apparently, and the key detail is that human people can never remember his name, no matter how they may try. It is also unable to be recorded in any way by human people. Given this mystery around the apparent real-life deity, could Gaiman's elusive merchant be Cernunnos? I like to think so, but what about you? Another possible face of this phenomenon could be the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a Native American cryptid said to have been born from the actions of desperately hungry, freezing human beings in the wild who eat the flesh of any human companions. It is also said that they are born simply from the action of eating human meat as a human being. Yes, cannibalism. What festive holiday-ish show wouldn't be complete without it? Do I believe that this is the sole and true origin of Wendigo-type creatures, beings, or peoples? Personally, no, I don't. It just doesn't make logical sense to me. I believe that more would be required for such a transformation. Still, I have more on that too in a few moments if you'd care to contemplate. Regardless of the cause or method of development or birth, the Wendigo is almost always depicted, if nothing else, as having deer antlers, though often much larger and thicker than those of our common deer. Some people say that the skinwalker, the Wendigo, and not deer are intricately related, if not the very same, and though I'm not so sure about that, I wonder what you would propose, and why. A gory detail is that sometimes not deer are alleged to be eating flesh and blood, just like skinwalkers and Wendigos are said to do. What, then, are we witnessing? Are they sincerely several types of beings or peoples? Could it be that there is one race who is posing as the not deer, the skinwalker, and the Wendigo, and choosing to put on and act as needed in any given moment to achieve a necessary or desired result? Or are people perhaps hallucinating, going mad in the forest? Our final story stop today is for the Native American legend of the Deer Woman, or the Deer Lady. As it goes, many moons before, there was a young woman who was traveling alone. She so happened upon a group of men who assaulted and violated her repeatedly with such force that she was dying by the time the men had finished with her. The men left her in this condition amongst the trees, battered and broken enough that she could scarcely muster even tears of pain. As she faded, a young fawn approached her. It kept with her until she found herself closing her eyes, surely for what she imagined to be the very last time. The next morning, when she awoke, she was not only astounded to be alive, but found that her health was restored to perfect condition. In examining her body, she discovered that from the waist down, she now possessed the form and strength of a deer. When she began moving about, it was swiftly revealed that she also had come to possess special paranormal, or as I call them, quantum abilities. When she'd taken full inventory of herself, her anger grew beyond measure. She decided that she needed revenge, and she found the men in the forest. When they saw her, their thoughts were consumed with further notions of lust and violence. They approached her with these intentions, unable to notice that she had transformed. When they were within striking distance, the young survivor attacked the men, kicking each down with her new deer legs and trampling every assailant in turn. The ones who attempted to run, she hunted them down immediately and stomped them to death as well. She and other women who have become deer ladies are said today to still dwell in the wild places, tempting and testing human men. Apparently, if a man enters her domain and encounters her, he must behave modestly, respectfully, if he wishes to live. Any man who encounters her, however, and behaves lustfully or disrespectfully, especially if he is already committed in theory to another woman or married, can expect to be bludgeoned to death by her hooves as well, or to be made lovesick, forced to endure a slow, agonizing death while his life force is drained away in pining. Still, another side to these women. It is said that they love and protect human women, and that for a woman to meet her may well end in good fortune or fertility. For many years, I've come across this assertion that human beings can become fairy or other upon their deaths, or upon a near-death experience. Even today, we have allegations that some people have had a near-death experience and come back being what is called a walk-in. In the days long gone, there were many semi-official village accounts of dead acquaintances and or loved ones being amongst the fae or becoming fae shortly after their physical passing. I believe that this is quite possible, personally. I suspect that death, ayahuasca, and near-death experiences change people and their current incarnate life paths in ways that we may fully never understand, or at least not until we are able to go home, beyond the physical and beyond the quantum. This is my working theory, anyways. One day I aim to share more with you on this. I contend that reality and physicality are highly adaptable outside of the human experience anyway. It seems to me that the solid human experience is rare, if not perhaps solitary, in its existence. And now I say that this is why the deer woman, if real, is able to adopt 3 different forms as needed. That of a traditional deer that we are familiar with, then the blended version of deer and woman, and finally, that of a young, beautiful human woman. All in all, I believe that there may be and likely are several types of not deer, and I think that approaching them with caution is wise. If I may, I would recommend only ever approaching wild land with an attitude of humility, sticking to the well-worn trails, going into or near them in the afternoon only if possible. And, of course, be respectful to anyone you may meet, for you never know if you may be the victim of anyone else who's not a deer.